Brother Circle, could you just share with us, what does the EEOC say about religious exemptions when it comes to these vaccines?
So the EEOC has actually given specific guidance on these vaccines, specifically COVID. And in their guidance, they say that if a person makes a religious objection, then the employer should go through a process to see if they can make a reasonable accommodation. And it's very important to understand what the EEOC defines as a religious objection. It needs to be religious in nature, but here's the deal. It's whatever you believe. It's not what your church believes. It says that even if you believe differently than the denomination that you belong to, that's okay. The EEO says even if you're the only person on earth that believes this, that's okay. That's a religious belief, and that they will support that. Applies to students as well. It's not just for employees. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people that think, oh, students, they don't have as much right as an employee. That's not true. We have to use different statutes, different ways to go about it. We don't get to use the administrative process that the EEOC provides. There's a little bit more regular court work that's done, but it can be done.
Okay, and how do you justify a religious exemption claim?
Well, a person just has to say, hey, I have this objection. In these cases, primarily we're going after two different things, especially in the Adventist community. The fact that these vaccines, they all contain or were tested on fetal cell lines from abortions. So if you believe in the sanctity of life. Also related to the sanctity of life is the sanctity of your own life. Like, our body is the temple of God, and we're to take care of it. You may take other vaccines, but other vaccines are totally different. You listen to what our presentation was here earlier. Those are different animals, right? And just because you take one doesn't mean you won't take, you don't have to take the other. And the law even allows you to have a conversion. So maybe you took a vaccine before. Maybe you took a COVID vaccine before, but you went through a conversion. You don't have to take the booster. So, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Adventists are in an incredibly strong position because why don't we smoke cigarettes? They're bad for you. They're bad for your body. It's the exact same thing, once you start to look at the data on the vaccine. So we have a strong basis.
We have some members sitting in our congregation tonight. I know in Loma Linda and other places where there are many Adventist physicians and medical professionals who are facing the real prospect of losing their jobs if they're going to be fired if they do not take the vaccinations. And so they're facing a real crisis of conscience right now. And we discussed this in the van coming back from O'Hare today. Is it better to resign or is it better to be fired, and why?
So you got to stick around and get fired. As much as you don't want to get fired, that's what you got to do because the courts redress a wrong. And the wrong thing is when they fire you. Okay? Now, there's some little wiggle room in some cases where we can go after it if they haven't fired you. But you really need to stay until you're fired. Plus, there's another thing going on. I just received a text where they'd done some kind of an informal study at UC Davis in California where they're expecting between, I think it was 25 and 40% of the staff at UC Davis are going to refuse. And so we're playing a giant game of chicken to see who's going to blink first. And if we just hold our ground and we don't blink, I want to say one more thing that's incredibly disheartening to me as a lawyer, and that is when I take a religious liberty case and someone says, oh man, it's too bad, I don't think I'm going to win, or whatever, and they cave. They go to work on Sabbath or something like that, and I look at them and I go like, man, I was working for all this because I thought you had a religious objection. Okay, if you got a religious objection, have the strength of your conviction.